top 100 rugby players of 2022. But how do we decide this? How do we work out who is the best of the best? How do we work out if someone's on their way to be a potential GOAT of the sport? Who was the MVP? Who was the number one best player in the world? All of this I wanted to work out. So what did I do? I took myself to my office, I sat down, and I started doing some work. I first started with recognising World Rugby had already kind of made the decision. How they came to that conclusion is very interesting.
The World Rugby 15's Player of the Year in partnership with MasterCard for both men and women. The nominees were selected by our new men's panel this year.
So World Rugby has a panel who makes a decision on who's nominated and then who actually gets selected. So the panel was made up of Jacques Burger from Namibia, Fiona Coghlan from Ireland, Terry Dusatois from France, Richie McCaw from New Zealand, Drew Mitchell from Australia, Ugo Monet from England, Melody Robinson from New Zealand, Blaine Scully from USA, and John Smith from South Africa. A panel full of, I guess, very different rugby players, a lot of different nations, all excelled in their time, making a decision of who was the best player in World Rugby.
Discussion, I can tell you, went long and hard on every international match this year, right up to last night's conclusion.
Now, a really interesting point from the award show here is it took into account only international rugby. When making this list, I decided that it was going to be international and club rugby based. So my top 100 is based off international and club rugby.
Winners of the World Rugby Men and Women's 15's Player of the Year 2022 in partnership with MasterCard are Josh van der Flier.
As we see, Josh van der Flier was selected as the best player in World Rugby. And so I decided pre this that I was going to sit down and do this list. And so what did I have to do? I had to go back to work. And what did it all start with? A spreadsheet. Basically what I did was I got together a spreadsheet of probably about the best 200 players in World Rugby. I went into every single team list I could find from the Six Nations, the Pacific Nations Cup, the Rugby Championship, and then the Autumn Nations Series. And I decided I'm going to make a list of everyone from there who I think has played really well, just completely off check. So a massive list. It was probably 250 players long. From there, we listed them all down. We worked out what international they were from and what club that they played for. Then we wanted to get into the stats of it, the statistics, the numbers of each player and how they performed. This proved a little bit more difficult than first thought, though, especially when we looked at players who played in the Japanese One League. Very hard to find information there. There's not specific stats. I tried to use some stats from Rugby Pass, but again, no Japanese One League. So we pulled a lot of information just from All Rugby, pulled as much information as we could from statistics to find kind of a decent list. From there, it went on to a very vibe check. I put it back into the spreadsheet and I said, okay, using the spreadsheet, what we're going to do is actually rank players against players in their position. So I'll have my top hookers, have my top props, loosies, all the way through, etc., etc., etc. And what we'll decide is who's the best player at that position, and then we'll come together and make the list using the stats and the vibe that we have kind of worked on up until this point. So without further ado, let's dive into the top 100 rugby players of 2022 in 2 minutes or less. Vinyaya Habose, Nick Frost, Jack Noel, Kazuki Hamino, Michael Hooper, Tanela Tupou, Angus Bell, Monte Ioane, Ange Capuzzo, Louis Rezamet, Dalton Papali'i, Sam Kane, Sever Reese, Andrew Callaway, Kurtley Anderson, Tom Wright, Nick White, Matt Fagerson, Mac Hansen, Ethan de Groot, Owen Farrell, Roman Matak, Mapazoli Mapimpi, Duhan van der Meulen, Dwayne Vermeulen, Tom Curry, Gary Ringrose, Stuart Hogg, Gonzalo Bertrano, Faf de Klerk, Stephen Kitsoff, Caleb Clark, Uni Atoni, Sam Simmons, Pete Samu, Juan Martin Gonzalez, Jaden Hendricks, Jamison Gibson Park, Peter Omani, Scott Barrett, Lou Diaga, Cheslin Kobe, James Slipper, Aaron Smith, Marcus Kremer, Alan Alatoa, Will Skelton, Julian Montoya, Courtney Laws, Samu Karevi, Gail Ficau, Len Ikitel, Damien Dealande, Billy Vanapola, Marcus Smith, Finn Russell, Jasper Wise, James Ryan, Jonathan Dante, Brodie Retallick, Cameron Woki, Dan Sheehan, Mario Otoje, Julian Machard, Andrew Porter, Samasoni Takahihau, Hugo Keenan, Thomas Ramos, Kyle Sinclair, Tard Burney, Cyril Barley, Peter Steph Dutois, Rico Ioane, Charles Olivion, Rob Valentini, Richie Mwanga, Freddie Stewart, Bowden Barrett, Kolisi, Pablo Matera, Darcy Graham, Eben Etzebeth, Sam Whitelock, Caelan Doris, Damian Willamies, Malcolm Marks, Franz Malheb, Damien Pinot, Marika Korobiti, Gregory Aldrit, Geordie Barrett, Emiliano Buffelli, Tard Burlong, Will Jordan, Anton Dupont, Lucano Arm, Alice Genge, Johnny Sexton, Josh van der Flyer, and drum roll please, number 1, Adi Savia as the number 1 player of 2022 in World Rugby. Take that one to the house, World Rugby.